Sometimes I get lucky, folks, and welcome to this podcast. But I had a lucky moment. In fact, all of them with my wife are. But she was cruising around on Instagram and she sends me this message saying, "You've got to check out this boy. His name's Trent Griessel in America, and he's doing great stuff." And so I have a look, and lo and behold, Trent, here you are. I'm so glad to have you. I'm so glad I found you. Welcome to this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, look, the thrill is mine because I exist here with this podcast to help people to just wise, smart, authentic information. And you have been doing that on Instagram. You're a Division 1 golfer. And I want to kick it off right there and sort of put you into perspective with it. How did you come to this idea of just being real, putting a phone in front of your face, for richer, for poorer, for sickness and health, and just talk about golf? I mean, it is brave and it's genius. So I want to know how you came to this.
Yeah, so I think I'd been toying with the idea for quite some time, and um, just purely out of fear of judgment of others and kind of fear of putting myself out there, it sort of stopped me from doing it for probably years. But eventually, I think I got to the point where it was just a moment of screw it, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as though there's plenty of people that I think I could provide value to. I have some close friends who had done similar kind of content in different niches, and they had found success. So, I just decided to just one day say, let's do this and just see where it takes me. And not even 3 months later, here we are.
Hey, proud of you. Okay, so let's now take a step back because I've put my cart in front of my horse. Um, Give us the quick bio. Born in South Africa, grew up in Washington State. Now you're in Texas. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so after growing up in Washington for the most part, I spent my sophomore year of high school at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, which for people who don't know is pretty much just a kind of a very sports centric boarding school,
Yeah.
essentially. And so I went there my sophomore year. I really struggled on the golf course. It just didn't end up being a great fit for me. And then from that, I got a tremendous opportunity to come out to Dallas and start working with Cameron McCormick and the Altus Academy,
Mm-hmm.
where I spent the remaining 2 years of my high school career working with them, living in Dallas. And then ultimately, I ended up going to play Division 1 golf at the University of Texas at Arlington, about an hour from my house. And now I just finished up my junior year and I'm heading into my senior year at UTA.
Here is the common thread. Not only are we South African in our blood, back in 1985, my family lived in Arlington, Texas for a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I went to Arlington High School, the Colts. And so I'm very familiar with where you are now. And it's a great program. In fact, put out some really good golfers back in my college coaching days. I had a few guys that came over from UT Arlington. In fact, three of them, a German kid, two Canadian boys who came and played for me. And then um, a young man called Aaron Kanth, he ended up with you boys for a season or two as well after he finished at CSU. So it's amazing to me how this very small world has come together because you've put golf tips on Instagram.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how small the world is. And yeah, Aaron's a phenomenal guy. He just graduated with us, and I think he's pursuing professional golf, which I think he should. He's a super talented and just such a great guy. So I'm sure he'll find plenty of success. But yeah, it's amazing. It's a small world.
It is. Okay, let's get into this. As I look at you, and it is brave to put yourself out there on social media because look, if I want to find out how bad I am as an announcer, I go to Twitter and I'll quickly realize, people will cut the legs out from underneath you. To take a delicate subject like golf improvement and be like, screw it, I'm going to do it. Was there a moment of inspiration? I know you had said that I want to do this for a while, but what was the catalyst? What was the turning point?
Um, I had a buddy of mine, a kind of a more recent acquaintance, really, who I reached out to about a year ago, and he's about my age, and he started doing talking videos, and from that he started a fitness brand, and now I think he's probably less than a year older than me, and he already has a 7-figure athletic apparel brand, just from kind of doing short form videos, and just from getting to know him a little bit better, and short talks with him. That was ultimately my inspiration. It had nothing really to do with the golf space as far as what put me over the edge. But that was really the tipping point where I kind of looked at him and I said, well, if he's doing it, I could do it. And I wanted to use it as a mental exercise in a way to sort of get myself out of my comfort zone. And I think it did a good job of that for sure.
Yeah, and I think what you do a great job of too is you kind of put golf in its place a little bit, because especially for a Division I athlete, for any aspirant golfer watching this, no matter your skill station, it can become all encompassing. Yet you are, and you're just kind of living your golf journey with people, and in many respects, I don't think you're realizing how helpful it is to people. So I'd love you to comment there, because oftentimes people will say, well, how do you become an expert in the game? Well, the expert is you live it, and then you're prepared to share your experiences, which you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's been kind of the hardest part for me, is that my mindset most of my life that I've struggled with is sort of, and for better and for worse in some ways, is kind of you're never there, or you're never good enough in a sense. So there's always a higher mountain to climb. So I think in some sense, when I first started posting, and even now, I kind of feel like a bit of an imposter, in the sense of like, I'm not the number one golfer in the world. And, as you said, people on the internet will certainly remind me of that. I've had quite my fair share of people with mean things to say. But ultimately, yeah, it's just sort of one of those things where I thought in my mind that I've had a very unique, and I've been grateful to have amazing mentors and learn amazing things along the way. And I just wanted to just give a glimpse and share that.
Okay, well, I wouldn't be featuring you on here if I didn't think you could help people. I'll tee it off with that. Okay, folks, Trent is authentic. He's raw. The post that caught my attention was when you had just shot 84 in a tournament. Then you backed it up with 69 or whatever the number was. And that's what my wife sent me. And she goes, check out this boy. Because lo and behold, our daughter had shot some horrible 80 number and was struggling to come back from that, because it was just a one-round event. So I want you to start there, because golf is that ugly game where no matter how good you are, and clearly you're very good, stuff happens. But you define by how you bounce back. So let's talk about that a little bit to start.
Yeah, so I had, in the span of 2 weeks, I had sort of the have it happen one way and then have it happen in the reverse order. So I played a great round of golf, shot 67 to qualify for the Texas Amateur, and then I went and played at Trinity Forest, which is a golf course I'm very familiar with. I shot a very
by the way. There's like one tree on the golf course, and we Byron Nelson there. I've never been hotter in my life.
Yeah. But so I go out there. I shot. I didn't have my best stuff that week, but I shot a very respectable 72 the first day, right around the cut line, and then I absolutely bombed the second day and shot 81. So that one was kind of in the order of that, and then, I probably not even 2 weeks later, I go to another qualifier and I shoot 84, and then I play again the following day and then shoot 66. So and in the matter of 3 weeks, just going on that kind of roller coaster, and I think then sharing that with people and sort of the little nuggets and lessons I learned from those experiences, it was kind of cool to see the comments and the things and the conversations that sort of arise from those experiences.
Here's where I commend you. Okay, I don't know if it was like I'm to a point now in the fourth of those 4 rounds where you're like, I don't give a stuff, I'm aggravated, because you've just shot 2 rounds in the 80s. Or if you honestly had like one of those moments. And so I want you to share the lessons that you learn from it, because golf is a roller coaster. And even on the highest of high levels, you'll see a score variance between the low rounds and the high rounds, even for the winners. It's not like they shoot 67, 68, there's ups and downs there. So I want you to share your takeaway from that experience, because to me, golf is a game of recovery, and not just a short game. It's how you bounce back after a bad day. So what was your takeaway from that?
Well, I think the first experience, having started off okay and then kind of bombing the second day, it really kind of put things into perspective a bit at the time, because I felt like I was playing really well.
Yeah.
And golf has an amazing way of humbling you very quickly, always and very constantly. And it certainly did that day. By the back nine of that tournament, my attitude was horrible.
Okay.
I was hot, I was dehydrated, I was frustrated, and it resulted in poor golf. And I think by the end of that round, it allowed me to really take some key sort of learning moments from that and try to move on to the next. And then obviously it's easier said than done. So then 2 weeks later, I chuck up an 84. Another, I'm frustrated again. I mean, sometimes it's not so easy to put into practice. Same thing.
Yeah.
I was frustrated. I was aggravated, all between the ears. And then you before you know it, you're signing for 12 over. But really, the kind of after those rounds, once the frustration had settled, and I had some time to reflect, I was like, wow. In both of these instances, I just saw the value of sharing that, in the sense that, like, when I was 15 and I shot these scores, or I had as bad of a performance, I would like hide in my room for days because I was so disappointed in myself. So I was just thinking from the perspective of my 15-year-old self kind of looking up at me, and the value that kind of just being vulnerable here and saying, listen, like, I play at the Division I level, and I still mess up really bad. I still have really bad habits that I try to overcome. I still have all these things that are super imperfect about me, and especially my golf game. And then from there, it almost like I felt very motivated to share that in a way.
Yeah. You talk about things, or we all have our own DNA, if you will. And you work with Cameron McCormick, who, amongst other folks, works with someone who has been awfully true to his golf DNA, and that's Jordan Spieth. I'd love you to elaborate a little bit over there, because we all have this inferiority complex a little bit, where we all feel like, no matter whether I'm a bogey golfer or a scratch golfer, where I'm missing something, or I should be better here. Where is the sweet spot there to being like, okay, I'm striving for more, but I'm pretty cool with where I am because I believe I'm still enough?
Yeah, so I think that really just comes down to identity, and I think a great role model of that right now is Scottie Scheffler.
Yeah.
He's absolutely dominating on the golf course and in the golf world. But when you listen to him speak, he talks about how he is Scottie Scheffler as an individual, as a child of God, as a husband, now as a father, as a friend, alongside or even before he is a golfer. So, he's a fierce competitor, but, no matter what, he has that to fall back on.
Yeah.
And I think in these last few years of my golfing journey, that's certainly been a big awakening for me, is that, I needed to find myself beyond just being a golfer. So, there is that striving for more always on the golf course, and never quite feeling like you're there. But at the same time, being secure and understanding that, I'm more than my scores.
Yeah.
And I'm more than my performances, and, I have more to offer this world. And I think that relationship between those two sort of provides that ability to strive for more, but also be happy with where you're at.
You tie a perfect loop there with a post of yours, and I've got it next to me here, where the title was "Comparison is the thief of joy." Now, that's biblical to me, and it's so true, yet it's so hard in this game we play, because we sort of defined by a number. Yet you go to look at the leaderboard, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm 50th. But the reality is, you're not 50th. It's just like how you did on the day. I'd love you to talk a little bit about that as a competitor.
Yeah, so I've had the amazing opportunity of being around a lot of world class athletes. So I know what it's like to be around excellence. And a downside of that is if you are, if you're caught comparing yourself to these individuals, these world beaters, it can be very demoralizing.
Mhm.
um, a perfect example, the first one that comes to mind for me was at the time that I spent at IMG Academy, a golfer by the name of Michael Thorbjornsen was there with
Yeah,
me.
he's standing
And I'm sure most people are familiar with him by now. I think he's just about a year older than me, maybe even less, and he's already just secured his tour card. Um, I don't have a personal relationship with him, but just being there and seeing him play day in and day out, um, and then relating that to my struggles and how far off from him I was at the time. It's hard, and that again just kind of leads back into the identity thing, is that when you're caught in the trap of only identifying with what you do, and it's falling short of your expectations or what others feel you should be achieving or what you think you should be achieving, then you kind of fall into a place where you almost feel worthless.
Yeah.
And it's all just due to the fact that you're comparing yourself to others who are living completely different lives and are on completely different journeys. Um, and you just have to focus on your own and just take it for what it is and be grateful for the one that you're on.
Amen. I'm going to take an anecdote that I heard from Eric Cole on this very podcast, and I'm going to pitch it at you and let you just wax lyrical. Eric was a talented young golfer, comes from basically golfing literati and his mom and his dad. Was a Division II golfer down at Nova Southeastern in South Florida. And whenever I watched him play, it was like, oh my God, this guy golf swing fell out of heaven. And then I'd turn around and I'd look for his score and be like 76 or 7. And he just would never close it out. Always looked like more. It should be more.
Mm-hmm.
Then he takes ill, battles Addison's disease, manfully still is struggling with diabetes, now using it as a platform, but he turns professional out of college after having not that great a college career and plays the mini tours forever down there in Florida and wins a bucket load of events. Fast forward, gets on the Corn Ferry Tour, gets on the PGA Tour Rookie of the Year. Now you talk about him as if he's a guy to beat week in and week out. And so I asked him about this, and he said, you know what? It came down to a mindset change. And he goes, I could look at my world ranking and say, see, I was 1,000 something, and Scottie Scheffler is number one, or Rory, whoever it might be. He goes, and that looks like it's a bridge just too far to climb. But if I broke it down, it was only going to be like a half a stroke a day, or maybe a stroke a day. So it's kind of like little bites, And he said, so I stopped comparing myself to the number one. I was like, if I'm just a half a stroke better a day, that stuff is going to add up. And lo
Yeah.
and behold, it did. So I'd love your take on that comment there, please.
I mean, I think that's huge. It's about finding a focus point on the horizon.
Oh, I like.
The human brain really struggles with the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
and when the distance to travel seems too insurmountable, or it's just you don't know how far you need to travel, it can be overwhelming. Um, and being able to break that down into bite-sized chunks and then be able to attack those, I mean, not only is it a confidence booster, I mean, it makes it breaks it down into a way that's much more achievable, and certainly creates momentum. And I can relate to that because I've been in every situation in my golf career. I've been the underdog, or I've been behind people. I've never been the number one at anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been chasing something, and I can relate to that feeling of feeling like the gap between me and someone else, or me and a goal, is too far. But I thought about it the exact same way. I'd put my stats into a stat tracker, or I would talk over some things and reflect with my coaches, and we would sort of break it down into little bits and pieces and just try to gain little percentage points here and there. And then after the course of days, weeks, and months, they start to add up, and you find yourself in a place that you didn't even maybe dream of. And it's amazing how that works.
That's true, because for anyone listening to this, it reminds me of the Paul Azinger quip. He goes, every golfers, or especially the elite golfers, you basically one swing thought or one feel away from playing great. And then he says, and when you're playing great, it feels like you'll never play badly. And then when you're playing badly, it'll feel like you're never playing great. So it's this weird cycle we're on. So let's now break it down. One of your posts here, you use something from a guy I've seen, and it was basically called Caveman Golf Advice. So now we're breaking this down into bite-sized chunks because in this era in which we live, there's information upon information for everything, and it looks like it's insurmountable at times. And sometimes I'm like, well, my putting stroke is a degree off, God forbid, but it's just a degree off. So Caveman Golf Advice, please.
Yeah, so that referencing just the most stripped down golf advice video I think I've ever seen in my life. It was just a man essentially screaming with a stick and a rock about swing plane. And I thought it was hilarious, but also just so applicable, because I think nowadays in the modern era of golf, everything is so overcomplicated. And I think to a degree, it can be very helpful at the elite levels because, at that point, you really are fighting for decimal points. Yeah. But even at that level, a lot of guys could probably be to benefit from some more simplification. And that's just kind of reducing golf down to its simplest form. Not forget about swing direction and spin loft and dynamic loft and all these, all the jargon and things that people like to spew on the internet, and just break it down to just the fundamental piece of, stick goes here, rotate here and hit golf ball. And it sounds so stupid, but it has so much truth.
Okay, well, to that, Scottie Scheffler, I love him. I love that human being. And in a strange sort of a way, you use the term caveman golf. He plays that a little bit, right? Before he's around, he doesn't have a launch monitor out there telling him how far the ball's going. Before every round, he's got his club with his molded grip on there, and he's checking his hands on there every single time. World's #1 golfer, checking his grip. So he's hitting the basic stuff. And then at the 2024 US Open, he didn't play very well, coming in off a win. Then he wins the following week at the Travelers Championship. And I heard him say that what kept him uncomfortable about being at Pinehurst #2 was with the native areas off both sides of the fairway. It didn't give him a side to miss. Yet he got back to somewhere else. He goes, I can miss my fade off to the right here. So then he just plays like, well, I'm going to aim here, and if it misses over there, I'm okay. If you listen to that statement, you're like, well, shit, that's genius. But the reality is it's really pretty simple. So let's talk about the course management, because you talked about, the greats having an absence of fear, or they're having the balls to hit the shot required. Again, they also play smart golf at times, knowing that, if I miss my ball over here, I'm still going to be able to play further.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of a couple things at play there. I think a lot of the great ball strikers, what you'll see is they have a shot that eliminates one side of the golf course. They're able to eliminate one side. And that ultimately kind of determines really how some golf courses suit the eye of some players over others. They feel as though, one side, if one side's more favorable to miss on, and that happens to be the side that they happen to generally miss on, you have more comfortability. But then it's also just a matter of understanding your own golf game and your tendencies, and then how that matches up with the golf course that's in front of you. I think professional golfers are much more one-dimensional in their shot shaping than people realize.
Yeah.
Primarily working the ball left to right. And a pretty good example of that would be, a lot of these guys, especially like you see it when they're playing Augusta. If they're a person who, only works the ball left to right, they're faced with some shots on that golf course where they have to really hug the tree line, or hit an exceptional shot where they're able to start that ball just left enough that it gives it room for their fade, but doesn't clip the trees. And those are situations where they've hit that shot thousands and thousands of times. They know they have it in them, but they have to step on that tee and stack up and just really just hit a golf shot.
Yeah.
That's just one example of, countless that you'll face in golf. But yeah, that's what I was really speaking to, scenarios like that.
The that is very, very smart advice. Having the bravado to hit your shot and then stepping up there. But oftentimes you look down a fairway and you just see trouble everywhere. And it's time to hit that shot. And your mind's in a bit of a panic and stuff is going wrong. And, the good golfer to me has got the ability to turn the bad day decent, where the not so good golfer turns that bad day worse. And you had a post about the downward spiral and stopping the downward spiral because it happens so quickly. And sometimes it starts happening unbeknownst to us. And the next thing is golfers on the course. It's happening when we least want it to. And it feels like quicksand that you can't get out of. What's your take? What did you share?
Yeah, so the downward spiral is probably something that every golfer ever could relate to. Whether it's from the first tee and things start going awry, or you had a great round going and all of a sudden it feels like everything's spinning out of control and you don't know what happened. That's just due to the 6 inches between the ears. Typically, there's normally always a stimulus or a catalyst that kind of gets you there.
Yeah.
But then once you're there, that's the hard part, is getting out of it. And I think it was probably around this time, so this would probably be a good example of what inspired me to make that video. I was playing a tournament at a golf course called Merido, and it's probably one of the hardest golf courses on the planet Earth. And I was in a college tournament, and I found myself probably 5-6 over through 6 holes at that golf course. And it's one where over par is winning just about every tournament played out there. So, but I'm sitting there and I know that I still have 12 holes to play, none of them easy, and I'm already 6 over. So all of a sudden, your brain starts going, oh my goodness, at this pace, I might shoot 90. What are people going to think of me?
All right, yeah.
And the thoughts spiral and spiral. And I remember I just had a moment where I squatted down. I realized what was going on. I realized I was spiraling. I realized that I had so much golf ahead of me. I took my towel, I kneeled down, I put it over my head. I did 2 box breaths, 2 box breath kind of work throughs. And just sort of took a moment, whatever it was, 30 seconds to just recenter myself, and sort of just give myself a moment to get grounded again. And I just remember, as soon as I took that towel off and I started playing again, it just sort of opened me up. And I also try to go into it with a sense of gratitude. Gratefulness is always a great tool to use to try to knock out those nerves. It's really hard to be nervous and anxious and grateful at the same time. And I remember it was one of those experiences where it was crazy. I remember I walked out of that moment and I was just so grateful to be there. And I think I played the rest of the round, even par, shot a 78, 70, whatever it was, somewhere around there, which I was more than happy with on that golf course for how I started. And it turned into one of those learning moments where I was like, dang, I definitely got to share this.
Isn't it crazy how the learning moments sometimes, or most times, happen when stuff is going wrong? When we're forced outside of our comfort zone. And learning moments don't necessarily mean that you got a 7-iron in hand and working on your golf swing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was, actually, I had the opportunity to speak with Bobby Jones' grandson yesterday. I was on a call with him, or great grandson, sorry. And he was giving me some good quotes, and he was talking about, how you don't really ever learn anything from winning. And that something along those lines. I'm probably butchering the verbatim, but and it's so true. It's so true. And I think on my journey, I know for me personally, I've done a hell of a lot more losing and getting beaten up and battered than I have winning. And I think that's just provided me with so many learning opportunities, and I've tried to really make the most of them.
You have I wouldn't say the luxury, you've earned the luxury of putting things into perspective. where I think most aspirant golfers, whether you're wanting to win your club championship or the member guest or a college event or whatever it might be, a junior event, they haven't really had that luxury. Where honestly, if you can just realize that everyone goes through this stuff, and it's not just you, that kind of unshackles one a little bit. Am I a bit
Absolutely.
crazy? Or are you feeling where I'm going?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think the joy that I felt in my heart has been the most when I've gotten messages or comments from people kind of centered around the fact where it was, I'm 14, 15, 16, maybe a college golfer even, and they said, I've been really struggling and I just felt so alone in my struggles. It feels like everyone's doing so good other than me. And you kind of putting this out there has made me realize that, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And because this game is so hard, and when you're on the internet, it what kind of warps your perception of what golf is really like. You turn on the golf channel, and all you see are these guys, all the highlights of them stuffing it, and the guys winning the tournament who are playing exceptionally well. And you don't see a whole lot of the guys who chucked up a 78, 78 and missed the cut. And it really it can you can get wrapped up in that very easily, and it can really make you feel less than very, very fast.
You know what? It's funny you say that, and you get me thinking of Jordan Spieth, who I've had the fortune of calling a number of times when he's in contention. And even when he's good, it's a little rural looking. Jordan hits it all over the show and somehow cobbles together scores, and people call it the Spieth roller coaster, as if it's supposed to be some other way. It's just he makes it more eventful because he's more conversational and more animated. But I want you to talk about the reality of golf, because I think you nailed it there. Even when these guys are playing well, it's still not perfect.
No, no. And I think what people fail to realize is, if you know, there's probably been thousands of Tiger Woods highlight reels made by now.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that everyone, all the shots that he hit that everyone drools over, or the most famous iconic shots. It wasn't 150 from the middle of the fairway.
That's true.
They're all from these outrageous spots where most people have their tail between their legs, and they have no idea what to do with themselves. But, just because of how mentally dominant he was able to have the presence of mind and obviously the ability to then step up and hit these shots from out of position, which most of them were. And that's what golf really is most of the time, is getting yourself from out of position and back into position.
Yeah, it's recovery. Well, look, that's a teaching moment there. Not that you haven't had a number. You've had videos of yourself, like fast forward what my practice session looks like. I'm certain, because you're the wise young golfer you are, practice isn't just block 7-irons all day long. I heard Tigers say, I drive on the golf course with like a handful of golf balls, and I get to a green, I just throw them. Then I go and try and get them up and down. But it's like Tiger's preparing completely for the examination up front, even with all his talent. And most folks are just preparing like this, and the golf course hits them with this, and then they're caught with their pants down and panic sets in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, and I think that's the problem with the driving range. And it was for me for a long time. Is you're not often presented with a perfectly flat lie to the same number over and over again. And I think a major breakthrough for me was getting myself off the driving range and just going and playing a lot more golf. Um, that's exactly right. I mean, you need to, in practice, present yourself with these situations, because it's pretty unreasonable to find yourself in a tournament and be behind the trees or under the trees, or have to, whatever these weird shots, plugged in a bunker, and all of a sudden you make your bogey or your double or your triple and you're frustrated, but you never practiced that once. So then they're upset with themselves and they're angry, but it's like, well, what you had no right to think that the result would be any different. If you did prevail, it was honestly just an aberration or luck, because you really didn't have any repetition to kind of back up, what you were doing there. So, yeah, finding ways to practice that that aligns more with what golf really is only going to benefit you.
You sound like my brother and me. My brother has got a son who's good, going to a Division I school, and me. And we've both, Trevor's been really good. I've been decent. And we both said to our kids, just what you said. It's like, you don't have the right to get angry. You have not worked on that shot over there. And it is amazing to me how, if a golfer can learn that, to say, well, I really, if I'm true to myself, I didn't know how to hit that shot. So instead of just kind of going crazy here, let's just limit the damage, take the big number off the scorecard, just make bogey and get out of here, and then I can still live to fight another hole.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Right. Okay, Reverend Trent, you've been preaching. One more. The most underrated skill in golf. This is coming from you. I love how you talked about playing to improve and putting yourself in all these environments. And you said the most underrated skill in golf, the post is on social, is self-coaching. This one hit me like a ton of bricks because I'm a teacher for a living who now broadcasts. And I have taught countless golfers, thousands around the world. Now I teach my eldest daughter. And I had a horrible moment the other day where stuff was going wrong on the course, and she walked past me. Kids aren't supposed to talk to people, adults, and she goes, "Help me. I don't know what to do." And I was like, clearly, sunshine. I have not taught her properly. So help us with self-coaching, please.
Yeah, and I think if I'm being totally honest, I mean, it's been probably one of the largest gaping holes in my game for the longest time. And another coach at Altus, Nick Dunn, who I work with nowadays a bit more than I do with Cameron, he was the one who really highlighted this to me through my high school days and my college days. Was that every time I was presented with a situation where I'm traveling for a tournament or I'm playing around and, things might be going wrong in my golf swing or with the putter or whatever, every single time I had an issue, I had to shoot him a text. I had to get on a call with him. I had to send him videos because I had absolutely no idea how to solve any problems. I wasn't a problem solver because I was so conditioned to seeing a problem and then say, okay, Nick, you fix it. You fix it. What do I do? And I think once I got to college and got a bit more independence and realized, oh boy, I'm kind of on my own here a little bit, I realized the need to be able to solve these problems on my own. And that really, I'd say for 3-4 months, the way I did it was I just stopped myself from texting my coach or reaching out to anybody. And I would just sit myself down and I'd take a deep breath and I'd say, okay, here's the problem. Let's find a solution. And I would sit there and I would, I'd sometimes at the beginning, I'd go up my own backside trying to figure stuff out. But then eventually it got a little easier and a little easier and a little easier. And then eventually I got to the point where it was like, okay, I'm at a tournament right now. It feels like I can't hit the ball in the air, but I don't feel that panicked because I feel as though I've trained the skill of being able to coach myself, and I think I can figure this out. And that's certainly translated to more consistent results and ultimately been a huge asset for me.
Isn't it crazy how all us well-meaning parents and well-meaning golfers, we want to improve, so you seek out the help of a professional or a PGA pro or whatever. And the next thing, we become so reliant on this information source that the ability just to kind of, to use a fellow Texan, dig it out of the dirt like a Ben Hogan to say, well, I got what I got. I got to figure out a way to put the lowest number on the scorecard possible today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to pitch this one at you. This is a former coach, college coach speaking. Maybe it was a bit, now that I share it, was a bit rude at times to my players, where I would see how they prepared. And then I could see that, hold on, this kid expecting that he's going to shoot 210 if par is 216 for the week, 54 holes, there's no chance. So he is setting himself up for failure. So I would say, all right, your par this week is 220, 4 over. Try and break par for me. And whereas now I share that, I'm like, that must have seemed grim to one or other young adolescent college golfer. I think in a way, if we have an accurate assessment of who we are on the given day, that's not necessarily who we are. It's just how we are on the day, because golf is variable. I'd love your take on that one, because you still they're in the throes of college golf.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely important if to have a mentor or a coach or somebody who's outside of yourself, who can definitely give you a bit of a reality check and sort of adjust expectations for you because
Reality
you
check.
know for me, I know this all too well from my own journey and kind of with my dad being that voice of reason. Sometimes I'd always set my expectations so astronomically high,
Mhm.
and that just kind of left me in a position where I'd just be so often disappointed. Um, and that can be for a number of reasons, and I'm sure it'll be a much longer conversation to go down all the the psychological rabbit hole for why that is. But I think it is important to be able to establish a more